He dove across the finish line in Oslo, certain he had just lost the biggest race of his life. He hadn't. A 17-year-old high school kid had just beaten the reigning Olympic champion by 1/100th of a second. A margin so small, it's basically the width of a fingernail. And before that race even started, the Olympic champion said something publicly about this teenager that should have been a warning sign to every 800-meter runner on the planet. We're getting to exactly what he said. But first, you need to understand where Cooper Lutkenhaus actually came from, because beating an Olympic and world champion at 17 is honestly just the tip of the iceberg here. If that opening alone didn't get you, wait until you hear how this kid still hasn't been to homecoming. Hit like and subscribe to Speed Academics right now, because this story only gets crazier from here. Okay, let's go back to the beginning. The story starts in a small Texas town, with two older brothers who made his life very difficult, and a dad who coached at the local high school. Justin, Texas, a small suburb northeast of Dallas, not a place with any history of producing world champions. Cooper Lutkenhaus grew up in a house where absolutely everything was a competition. He played 5 sports in middle school, including wrestling, and obsessively studied Dallas Cowboys game film. This was a kid wired to compete at everything, all the time, long before anyone outside Texas knew his name. His dad, George, ran collegiately and is now the athletics director for the entire school district. His mom, Tricia, is the principal of Northwest High School. The kid who just beat the Olympic champion goes to a school where his own mother runs the building. His mom tells a story about a church league basketball season where Cooper, much younger than his teammates, played up with his brother's team anyway and sometimes outplayed them. From the very beginning, the only thing Cooper Lutkenhaus wanted was to prove he belonged somewhere he wasn't supposed to be yet. That one detail is basically his entire career in a sentence. He starts running track in middle school, wins every race, and doesn't think much of it. He says he just wanted to win and assumed everybody felt that way. He didn't know yet that they didn't. 8th grade, Cooper runs 1:53 and 1:54 in the 800 meters. Most adult recreational runners would consider a 1:53 the best race of their life. He's doing it at 14. He wins the Brooks PR Invitational and the Nike Outdoor Nationals. The track world notices a little, the way it always does with a fast young kid, and quietly wonders if it holds up. Because being a fast middle schooler in Texas means nothing to the men racing the Diamond League. The gap between junior meets and professional track is enormous. He goes into high school and wins every 800 he enters. A Texas Class 5A state title as a freshman, then Class 6A the next year. Undefeated, getting faster every season, but the wider athletics world still isn't fully paying attention. The men he actually needs to beat aren't running at Texas high school meets. They're running in Oslo and Stockholm and Eugene with Olympic medals around their necks. Winning Texas titles is incredible, but it answers nothing about whether he can compete with the best in the world. Enter Coach Chris Capo, the man who builds the structure around Lutkenhaus, as he makes the jump from exceptional high schooler to professional athlete in 2025. Still in high school, still going to class, but now training for world championships. One detail about how Capo trains him explains why the biggest moments keep going his way: the kick. His entire career, Lutkenhaus has had a natural trigger point at 200 meters to go. In his own words, ever since middle school, that's the spot he really pushes from. It is not random, it is drilled race after race until it becomes instinct. And on August 3rd, 2025, in Eugene, Oregon, that instinct changes everything. U.S. Outdoor Track and Field Championships. Cooper Lutkenhaus is 16 years old, lining up in the 800-meter final against professionals and Olympians who have been doing this their entire adult lives. With 200 meters to go, he's in 7th place, dead last in the places that matter. Then, the kick turns on. He goes from 7th to 2nd in the final 200 meters, running 1:42.27 and U18 world record by more than a full second, beating Josh Hoey, Bryce Hoppel, and Brandon Miller, men who between them hold Olympic medals and World Championship final appearances. He finishes second overall, behind only Donovan Brazier. Hayward Field erupts. Distance running coach Steve Magnus watches it live and posts immediately that it is the most impressive athletic feat he has ever seen. The youngest American ever to qualify for the World Athletics Championships is a 16-year-old about to miss English literature class to be in Tokyo. But Tokyo does not go to plan, and this is the part the highlight reels skip. September 2025, World Athletics Championships. Lutkenhaus flies to Japan with his actual homework packed in his bag, the youngest American ever to compete at this level. He goes out in the heats. The 800-meter World Championship field is tactical, physical, and brutal in ways a Texas high school meet cannot prepare anyone for. The best runners in the world know how to box you in, how to make sure a dangerous kicker never gets the space to unleash. Lutkenhaus doesn't advance. He goes home. It isn't a disaster, but it's a clear message. Raw talent and a devastating kick are not enough on their own. The world stage demands experience, and the kind of tactical intelligence that only comes from racing the best over and over, losing, and coming back. Quick one for the comments. At 16 years old, would you rather miss your entire junior year of high school life to chase the World Championships, or stay home with your friends and have a normal year? Because Cooper chose the race every single time, and I genuinely want to know what you would have done in his shoes. March 2026, Torun, Poland. Most of Cooper Lutkenhaus's classmates are home for spring break, at the beach, sleeping in, playing video games, doing normal 17-year-old spring break things. Lutkenhaus is in Poland, running the 800 meters at the World Indoor Championships against the best middle distance runners alive. He wins in 1:44.24. Youngest individual world champion in the entire history of track and field. Not just American history, not just the 800 meters, every single event, going back to the very beginning of the sport. A 17-year-old from Justin, Texas, whose mom is telling him he still has to go to prom, is now a world champion. Then comes his Diamond League debut in Stockholm just 3 days before Oslo. He wins that too, running 1:42.70, becoming the youngest ever winner in Diamond League history since the series began back in 2010. That record had stood for 16 years before he touched it. And then Emmanuel Wanyonyi decides to show up. Let me tell you exactly who this man is, because you need the full picture before you understand what happened in Oslo. Emmanuel Wanyonyi is 21 years old, Kenyan, the Olympic champion from Paris 2024, the world champion from Tokyo 2025, and by every measure the most dominant 800-meter runner alive today. He skipped Stockholm specifically to be fully fresh for Oslo. He knew exactly what he was walking into. And before the race, Wanyonyi said this publicly. Cooper is great and looks really strong. He's definitely the future of this event, but we are still here to hold the fort. The future of the event said out loud by the reigning present champion. That wasn't dismissal. That was a man respecting a threat so seriously he felt he had to name it before it happened. And then he went out to try and prove he was still the king. June 10th, 2026. Oslo Bislett Games, the most famous middle distance track in the world. A track that has hosted 70 world records across its history. The race goes out fast. Wanyonyi leads through the bell, exactly as he always does, dictating the pace with his experience and his power. Lutkenhaus tracks him, patient, waiting. 200 meters to go. The trigger fires. He takes the lead, opens a gap into the final straight. Wanyonyi is not done though. He comes back hard, closing that gap meter by meter all the way to the line. They hit the tape together. A photo finish. Lutkenhaus dives across the line, genuinely convinced he has lost, landing on the track believing the Olympic champion just edged him at the death. Then the time goes up. 142.08 for Lutkenhaus. 142.09 for Wanyonyi. 1/100th of a second. Less than the blink of an eye. The smallest possible margin by which one human being can beat another in professional athletics. The kid? From Justin, Texas, who was supposed to be worrying about prom, who missed spring break for Poland, who packed homework for Tokyo, just beat the reigning Olympic and world champion by the width of a fingernail. 6 races as a professional, 6 wins. World Indoor Champion. Youngest Diamond League winner in history. World lead for 2026. 3rd fastest American in history at 1:42.08. Now think about Wanyonyi for a second. This is a man who has spent 2 years sitting at the very top of the 800 meters, defending his title at every major championship, carrying the full weight of being the best in the world. He came to Oslo ready. He trained specifically for this exact race. He gave absolutely everything down that final straight. And a 17-year-old who still has to go to prom beat him anyway. You already know what Wanyonyi is thinking, because he told you himself before the race even started. The future of the event is here. The only real question left is whether he can hold the fort long enough to survive until LA 2028. After Oslo, someone asks Cooper what his goals are for the near future. He doesn't mention Wanyonyi. He doesn't mention the world record. He doesn't bring up LA 2028 or the rest of the Diamond League calendar. He says he hasn't been to his school homecoming yet. He says he probably has to go to prom because his mom told him he has to, so he needs to start making some plans. And then he says the one line that should make every 800-meter runner on the planet deeply uncomfortable. When asked what he thinks is actually possible for him, he says, simply, "I don't know what is possible." Not false modesty, not a rehearsed media answer. A 17-year-old who has already beaten every single opponent put in front of him, telling you honestly that he hasn't found his ceiling yet. The world record in the 800 meters is 1:40.91, set by David Rudisha at the London Olympics in 2012. It has stood for 14 years. Nobody has come close. The greatest middle distance runners of the last decade have looked up at that number and quietly accepted it as untouchable. Cooper Lutkenhaus just ran 1:42.08. He is 17 years old, and he says he doesn't know what is possible. Do the math with me for a second. LA 2028 is 2 years away. A home Olympics on American soil, the 800-meter final in Los Angeles in front of the single biggest crowd in the history of this sport. Lutkenhaus will be 19, still technically in his first full professional season by the time the games arrive. If the improvement from 16 to 17 is anything to judge by, then what 19 actually looks like is genuinely unknown territory. He said so himself. Think about that trajectory for a second. 16 to 17 took him from a promising high schooler to a world champion who beat an Olympic gold medalist. What does one more year of that curve actually look like on the biggest stage the sport has ever seen? So here's what I want to know from you. Los Angeles, 2028. Cooper Lutkenhaus is 19 years old. Olympic 800-meter final on home soil, the entire country watching. Does he win gold? And does he break David Rudisha's 1:40.91, a record that has stood since 2012 and become the greatest 800-meter runner in the history of this sport? Drop it below, subscribe to Speed Academics so you're already here for whatever happens next, and tell me honestly, before Oslo, did any of you actually see this coming? Every single comment gets read.